Hey, what's up, internet? Long time no see. I thought I would do a quick video on the Balance Manifesto that came out yesterday. A lot of people have been asking me about freezing pulse totems and whatnot, and my thoughts on it. So let's go over it really quick. The main changes here for freezing pulse totem and all spell totem stuff is that Soul Mantle is losing +1 to maximum number of summoned totems. Pretty painful, but it is what it is. There's nothing to do about it. The spell totem support is also getting nerfed from 24% less damage to 40% less damage in the base. Now, the reason for this and the other nerfs to these other supports, like trap support, is that they are doing a really large damage buff to basically all spell gems. They only list a bunch of them here, but this should apply to basically every hit spell gem in the game. So they're trying to sort of equalize how strong the spells are in their gem versus how much penalty you get for turning them into a totem or whatever. And they're actually pretty accurate with their math. I show in my Freezing Pulse Totem thread, if you want to go look at that. If you were using multi-totem already, you're actually getting a slight damage buff. 3.17. It's not quite as much as some people think, because Ritual Awakening is obviously going to get nerfed. It looks like it's about a 4% damage buff as things stand, but there's a bunch of things that we don't know. You know, you're going to have sort of a varying amount of damage gain from the jewel socket you're going to get back. Just a rare jewel should do quite a bit of damage. There's also some damage coming from the itemization changes in the cast speed. So wands and rings and amulets are going to have higher tiers of cast speed rolls. Pretty good for the wands. And depending on if we can get a ring back into the be relevant. Now, the other thing that happened with Freezing Pulse specifically is that they're basically trying to delete all the threshold jewels. So Freezing Pulse is one of the such gems. It has First Snow. This jewel gives us +2 projectiles per jewel. You can have 2 of them. So this was giving us 4 free projectiles. Well, not free, with a jewel slot, but they removed this jewel entirely, and they basically just compensated Freezing Pulse with pure damage, which doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. Up here at the top, they kind of call out skills like this. It says, for many such skills, this means granting more damage in exchange for efficient sources of extra projectiles. This feels like it isn't really justified in this sentence. It just says that, like, this is what we did. And it doesn't make a lot of sense, because if you look right above that, they talk about Orb of Storms, Flame Blast, Lightning Tendrils, and Ice Spear. Giving these skills improvements to give them clearer lanes, right? In these two sentences, they're basically saying that they are aware that skills need lanes. Like, skills need purpose beyond damage to give them, like, meaningful builds and purpose. Well, this change to the Threshold Jewel for Freezing Pulse, in particular, achieves the exact opposite effect, because Freezing Pulse's lane right now is a clear speed skill. It doesn't have a good single target. The efficient projectiles coming from First Snow, and then, like, the nature of the projectile itself, along with the freeze and the projectile speed, make it a clear speed focus skill all the way across the board. And compensating it with pure damage in exchange for these efficient projectiles just doesn't make any sense. It's really damaging Freezing Pulse's lane, like its purpose to exist right now. It's certainly not getting enough damage to be like a competitive single target skill, which is exactly why they aren't calling it out. They're calling out skills like Flame Blast or Ice Spear. It's not doing anywhere near enough damage for that. And Ice Spear is getting a similar buff anyway, minus the compensatory damage for not having a threshold jewel. But this gem was doing so much more single target than Freezing Pulse anyway. There was no amount of damage you were going to give Freezing Pulse to be competitive with such a skill. So I don't really understand the purpose of sort of deleting Freezing Pulse's lane, like its reason to exist, as much. It'll still be an okay clear skill. We know that it's not really going to be losing damage, but losing the projectiles just harms the purpose of the skill. It doesn't really accomplish anything. Like, you're not pushing enough damage into it to accomplish something new. You're just continuing to dilute skill and leaving it without a lot of purpose. So if you played the skill in 3.16, I think it'll feel similar, but just worse, right? Like the amount of damage you're gaining is fairly small. I would assume that on the other side of the changes, like they also mention down here in the unique item balance, they're making some changes to aura supports because they're trying to sort of figure out what to do with March to the Legion. And so they're removing Moral Conviction, which is a keystone behind the blood magic. They're going to turn it into a support gem. So it'll be a support gem that you link to an aura. It'll make that aura free, and then it'll prevent you from ever reserving mana again, right? We might be able to use that to replace Essence Worm in the build, the ring. Maybe we can even use it in conjunction and run 2 free auras. I doubt that's the case. I'm pretty sure they're going to make you choose between those dynamics. But we would probably still rather give up a gem socket to get the ring slot back. Even if we just used another magic ring with Breedy's Veil, you would get immunity to crit bonus damage and unlucky hits against you. But it's even, the ring slot is worth even more in the context of these changes because they're making these itemization changes to buff cast speed affixes, right? The rings are going to go up to like 16% cast speed at max. Right now they're like 5 to 7. So 9% more cast speed on a ring compared to what we could get before means that the opportunity cost of Essence Worm is going up. We would like to get rid of it if we could. I would assume that, you know, on the other side of all of these changes and the rare jewel we would be able to add, it'll probably do around like 10 to maybe 15% more in terms of raw damage, like overall DPS, including the missing totem and stuff. But each of those totems is shooting 2 less projectiles. And if the damage it's doing, like 15% more than the current level of Freezing Pulse damage, is not like there's no like new lane there. No new purpose identified in such a small increase in damage, right? So, I don't know. It feels like it really misses the mark in terms of purpose. I really think this is a bad change with the Threshold Jewel. This is not a build that can run LMP or GMP. That's your idea, you should just not play the build. Frankly, it's a bad idea. Freezing Pulse already has very bad support gems. Cannot, under any circumstances, afford to run such a bad support jewel. On the more positive side, Siege Ballista is basically not included in this entire manifesto for whatever reason. If anything, it might have gotten a slight buff in the sense that it should be easier to find some way to level your satisfaction with all these changes to like hit bow builds itemization. I would assume that low level bow gear is going to be a lot more powerful. That would be nice, right? If you don't want to level Holy Flame Totem. I would presume Holy Flame Totem is a little bit easier to level with too now because Holy Flame Totem got a slight buff to the tune of about like 15% base damage in the level 20 gem, which if you think about your time with this gem, it'll basically be more like a 8% in the campaign. Presumably, Wave of Conviction will wind up on this list. If it doesn't, it might actually be kind of a wash, if not worse, because Wave of Conviction will essentially be worse because of the Spell Totem nerf, right? So it needs a damage buff too. Presumably, it's going to get it though. I would expect to see basically every spell on this list getting somewhere between 45 and 65% more damage. But in terms of the mid-game and beyond, Siege Ballista is just completely unaffected by this entire manifesto. It got a slight nerf in the nerf to added cold damage, the gem. But this is like a single gem level worth of damage. Doesn't matter. What we're more interested on the Siege Ballista side is like what's happening with Yuri's Quiver, the like Fated Prophecy version. You know, we want to hope that that quiver is just like a map boss drop, not something that one of the reasons I want to make this video is speaking more on this set of changes to spells. It kind of applies to the hit-based bow attack stuff too, but this feels like a really like misguided set of changes to me. In that if the issue, like they say, most spellcasting builds deal too little damage, I guess this is sort of true, but it's not the problem. It says have too few defensive and mobility options. Yeah? then only this was adjusted and none of this. So this is actually why nobody plays self-cast. Too few defensive mobility options. This doesn't matter until this is solved, and nothing about this is in this list. Right? So what's going to happen here is that lots of eager Andes are going to see this list and be like, wow, Lightning Tendies is like 65% stronger. I'm going to make self-cast Lightning Tendrils. And then they're going to go into Siege of the Atlas, a completely new expansion with a set of new Guardians and endgame boss they've never seen. And they're going to get posterized. Like, they're going to get absolutely dunked on. Because this function is the same as it was before. It's like people forgot why they never played self-cast. And you're telling all these people to go play self-cast and bow builds in the new league just so they can get absolutely smacked by bosses they've never seen? It's going to be a disaster. Like, this feels like the biggest debate league I've ever seen. Even more than the old bow league. Like, there are people that are really going to play like self-cast Flame Blast. And then like Cirrus's brother is about to show up in the new Atlas with like twice as many storms, you know, and a new hat, and you're just gonna feel so bad for even thinking this was an idea. I'm not sure why this was timed with this patch. I probably would not send people into a new, like, the largest amount of new content you put out in the year with like the absolute least defensive builds in the world. Probably not what I would have done. I think we're going to see a lot of Elden Ring gamers about week 2. But I really would have liked to have seen more changes along the lines of fixing this, especially when 3.16 added so much more defensive options, but they just dumped them all on the bottom left of the tree, basically. Like, all of these hugely defensive options, they just barely got handed out to anybody but Melee. Right? Like, these Determination and Grace and Spell Suppression boys, they all got Fortify on top of that stuff. And then Fortify got taken away as like even a thought for something like a self-cast spell build. Which doesn't make any sense. Why would Lightning Tendrils not have access to Fortify but Cyclone does? Does that make any sense to anybody? What about Scorching Ray? Not only does Scorching Ray plant itself on the ground, like, it can't even, it turns like a Ford Ranger. You know what I mean? Like, and yet Cyclone can have Fortify and that thing can't? And do you really think that a bunch of damage is going to solve this paradigm? It won't. And this is actually just going to highlight the problem with the biggest magnifying glass. I don't know. Just consider yourself warned. Like, you see all these big buffs and you put them into a spreadsheet and it's like they look really big. You see, just remember, if you've never equipped this gem like Lightning Tendrils in your life or Rolling Magma, there's probably a reason. And damage is not it. Just remember, you have to go learn completely new boss fights on these builds when you pick these league starters. Or even, not even a league starter, just your plan to a build you're going to play in 3.17. Like, you have a lot of new things to learn. Do you really want to learn it trying to play self-cast Shock Nova? Like, don't get baited. People get baited every league by the new skills. Don't get baited. You have to play a build that you cannot die on. I don't mean cannot die, I just mean one that you have a chance to not die. So you can actually learn the fights. I don't know. I feel like you can get your Steam charts Reddit posts written right now. It's going to be a lot of Elden Ring. See it now. Anyway, I mean, it feels bad a little bit to feel this negative about a manifesto that technically is so filled with buffs, but they just feel like really, they feel like buffs that just miss the mark, I guess I would say. Some questionable decisions going on. But if you're a Freezing Pulse Andy, like, the build's gonna be okay. You played it in 3.6, it'll definitely be playable in 3.7, I think. 3.17, that is. Um, it's just being diluted, and more quality of life is being removed, which, is starting to get a little bit tiring. Um, my suggestion at the moment is I would probably bank on Siege Ballista a lot more. But I think Freezing Pulse, is still going to be an option just because, gear is probably going to be cheap too, right? We'll probably have to reconvene this with patch notes. Well, we'll reconvene on the live stream in a couple of days here. That should be on Thursday. Feel free to stop by Twitch TV/WalkTV and we'll watch that. But we're going to have to reconvene with patch notes. Make sure Rain of Splinters survived, because if it didn't, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what a lot of totem builds are going to do. Freezing Pulse certainly would go right in the trash can, I think, without Rain of Splinters. With this set of changes, I would really like to see them walk this back on Freezing Pulse first. Now, I mean, the jewels got to get deleted, but I really think 2 of these projectiles probably needed to get rolled into the, and then some of this damage needed to be rolled back, because this is a clear skill. It's never not going to be a clear skill, but right now it's kind of just like a, used to be one of the best, and now it's just kind of there. It's just kind of like not very exciting. But anyway, we'll reconvene with live stream once again with the patch notes, and hopefully we will see some more hopeful news. But for now, I'm gonna get out of here. I'll see you guys on Thursday for the live stream. Peace.